Hello, everyone. Oh, let me cut this phone up. Cut the phone volume off. Okay, hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in once again to Queen Amadaya TV, More Than Meets the Third Eye. I'm your host, Queen Shakur. So as you're coming in, please feel free to go ahead and share this. Well, you can't share it, but go ahead and feel free to like the video. Okay, this is a members only exclusive. And my apologies for any non-member who was in here in the chat or watching, but I forgot to post this as members only. I did put that in the community tab. So I hope no one who wasn't a member was watching because I had to change it to members only. Okay, this is an exclusive. Now I'm downloading this video really quick that I want to show you guys. Just a brief 3-minute video, but it is a lovely lady that is on TikTok, and she does poetry. And she's an elderly lady, but she does some nice poetry. And I specifically liked this poem, and that someone duetted. And so I'm going to show that to you all in just a moment. Okay, so hello, Juju is in the house. Kathy B, Tia. Okay, my fan page. All right, Eileen, Capricornus, Mr. Hotel, sit down somewhere. Okay, that Crazy Beach Aries, Gina Lane, Kathy B, did I say you? Okay, so with that all being said, shout out to all my Stardusters in the chat. Okay, hello, Andrea Jones, beloved, I see you. Tia. Oh, so anyway, yes, Mr. Hotel, it is story time. Okay, so let me tell you all about Mr. Hotel. I very often, hey, Hundia, beloved, Ladybug 77, Melanin 81. All right, Emma's blessed. Hundia. Okay, so I very often tell the nefarious Mr. Hotel himself, about books that I've read or, books that are good to read and stuff like that. And so many months ago, I told Mr. Hotel about this book, Who Moved My Cheese, and told him that he should purchase it, and which he did. But clearly he didn't bother to read it. Because when I told him that I was going to be discussing the book on the live, well, he absolutely had no clue. And then when he realized, he texted me and said, "Oh, Queen, I remember you told me about that book. I actually bought that book." Then sends me a picture of his dog with the book. Okay, so he hasn't gotten a chance to read it yet. So Miss Hotel said, "I sure didn't." Okay, so now the picture behind me on the screen, these are the 4 protagonists of the story. You have him and Haw and Sniff and Scurry. So with that all being said, Honey said, "Queen, I bought it and read it." Okay, great, beloved. Okay, so what we're going to be doing, hey, Khalid, Herlene, and what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be reading the book. Hey, Gina and Nessa G. I'm going to be reading the book to you over a period of the next couple of days. Okay, I actually read this book in one day when I first bought it. It's like 98 pages, but I'm going to read you some passages today, and then a few passages each day until we're done, and then we're going to discuss which one of the protagonists in the book are you, because everyone in here, you're one of those 4 protagonists. Okay, you're one of those 4 protagonists. Hey, warrior status. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. Now, I think this video is just about ready. So I'm going to play this video of this woman doing her poetry first, and then we'll get into that. Okay, and I may start sharing a poem or 2 with you all weekly, because there's a lot of good poets that I follow on TikTok. Okay, and I also do spoken word myself. So I'll be sharing some of my own poetry with you too, sooner than later. Okay, so here we go.
Good afternoon. I wanted to share something with you. I've been real sick for a while and finally feeling like actually sharing something, but someone had asked me a while back while I was sick to share this again and to put it back up, but I can't remember their names. I wish I could. I would tag them in this, but I'm going to share it in honor of my mother, who was gone a year March 1st. I hope it'll bless you. It's our time in history. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers, wider freeways, but narrow viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy less. We have bigger houses but smaller families. More conveniences but less time. More degrees but less sense. More knowledge but less judgment. More experts yet more problems. More medicine but less wellness. We drink too much, smoke too much, spend too recklessly, and laugh too little. We drive too fast, get too angry, stay up too late, get up too tired, and read God's Word too little. We watch TV too much and pray too seldom. We've learned how to make a living but not a life. We've added years to life but not life to years. We've been all the way around the world and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet a new neighbor. We've conquered outer space but not inner space. We've cleaned up the air but polluted the soul. We've conquered the atom but not our prejudice. We write more but learn less. We plan more but accomplish less. We learn to rush but not to wait. We built more computers to hold more information and to produce more copies than ever. But we communicate less and less. These are the times of fast food and slow digestion, big men but small character, steep profits but shallow relationships. These are the days of two incomes yet more divorces, fancier houses but broken homes. These are the days of quick trips, disposable diapers, throwaway mortality, one-night stands, and pills that can do everything from cheer to quiet to kill. It's a time when there's much in the showroom window, but nothing in the stockroom. It's a time when technology can bring you this message, and a time when you can choose to either share this insight or just hit delete. So just remember, spend some time with your loved ones because they won't be around forever. Remember to say a kind word to someone who looks up to you in awe because that little person will soon grow up and leave your side. Remember to give a warm hug to the one next to you because that's one treasure you can give from your heart that doesn't cost you a cent. Remember to say I love you to your partner and to your loved ones, but most of all, when you say it, mean it. A kiss and an embrace will mend a hurt if it comes from deep down inside of you. So remember to hold hands and cherish the moment because someday that person won't be there. Take time to read God's Word. Take time to pray. Take time to speak. Take time to love. And take time to share the precious thoughts of your mind. For our life is not measured by the breaths that we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. May God bless you. I love you all, but most important of all, God loves us. God bless you. Amen.
I think I have a tear in my eye. My goodness, honey. Every time I hear that, it speaks to my soul. You know, that is wisdom coming from an elder. Okay. Doesn't matter whose elder she is, she's an elder, and she was speaking words of wisdom. I thought that was beautifully said. Beautifully said. So, with that all being said, if any of you have some poetry that you write and you would like to read it on the live, with one of our exclusive for members only, feel free to let me know and I can drop the link for you sometime. Okay? Because like I said, I'm going to start sharing some of my own spoken word with you all. Okay? And so with that all being said, and without further ado, Crazy Beach Heiress, we love you right, Black beloved. Okay? A quote from Maya Angelou that I live by. People may not remember what you do or say, but they will always remember how you feel. Or how you made them feel. Yes, absolutely. That's very true. Absolutely. You know, that's one of my favorite poets. Okay. Maya Angelou is, in fact, one of my favorite poets. I would have to say Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, Robert Frost, William Ernest Henley, and I'm forgetting some. Oh, Nikki Giovanni. And I want to tell you all something. Speaking of Nikki Giovanni, I do love her so. But here's the thing. Nikki Giovanni was a professor at Virginia Tech Back in 2006, when that shooter shot up the whole campus, how many of you remember that? Back in 2006, when these students shot up the campus at Virginia Tech, deleting 33 people. Once in the chat, if you remember that incident, once in the chat. Now, let me tell you something interesting about that. This young man, or this thug, whatever we want to call him, who deleted those people, Nikki Giovanni had in fact warned the college. She had warned them that he was dangerous, that she felt that he had a potential to do something drastic. Now, how did she know this? You may ask. Well, she knew because she had this young man in her class. And when he would write poetry, he wrote very dark, gory poetry, which led her to think that likely this young man is unstable, that he's capable of violence and causing damage and destruction. So she warned them of this months before he shot up that school, months before he shot up the campus, and they dismissed her claims. But you see, here's the thing. Only someone who's a true poet would really know and understand that very often, in fact, most often, people who write poetry and spoken words speak the very things that are hidden within their minds and their hearts. They speak what is written in their minds and in their hearts. That's what they speak. So when he was saying all of these things in this poetry, she knew that that's what he really thinks. And that's what he has in his heart. She tried to warn them, but they didn't listen. They didn't listen. Who wrote We Wear the Mask? I love that poem. I can't remember, but I do know that poem, beloved. I do know that poem. So with that all being said, another one of my favorites is Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson is likely going to be one of the presidential candidates again. She ran last time. They're not going to let her win, I'm sure, because she's too much of a spiritual person, so very humane and so peaceful and all of that. She's actually a spiritual advisor to some of the A-listers like Oprah, but she wrote this very beautiful poem that was featured in the movie Coach Carter. What is our deepest fear? That's one of my favorite poems. Okay, so anyway, with that all being said, let's get into this book, Who Moved My Cheese? Okay? Who Moved My Cheese? For those of you who've never heard of it, I think you'll find this very insightful. So the first part we're going to talk about is the gathering at a gathering in Chicago. Okay? And then we'll get into the chapters. This is like the preface. Let me put on my spectacles. These are my new glasses, honey. I don't know how I look in these, honey. Don't y'all laugh at the queen, honey. These are my new spectacles. Straight out of Dollar Tree. Pay attention. Okay, straight out of Dollar Tree, honey. I'm not ashamed. All right. The queen gets her glasses from Dollar Tree. Pay attention. That's why I have so many different colors. Okay, so now... Okay, so now let's get into it. All right. So one sunny day in Chicago, several former classmates who were good friends in school gathered for lunch, having attended their high school reunion just the night before. They wanted to hear more about what was happening in each other's lives. After a good deal of kidding and a good meal, they settled into an interesting conversation. Angela, who had been one of the most popular girls or people in class, said, life sure turned out differently than I thought it would when we were in high school. A lot has changed. It certainly has, Nathan echoed. They knew he had gone into his family's business, which had operated pretty much the same and had been a part of the local community for as long as they could remember. So they were surprised when he seemed concerned. He asked, but have you noticed how we don't want to change when things change? Carlos said, I guess we resist changing because we're afraid of change. Carlos, you were captain of the football team, Jessica said. I never thought I'd hear you say anything about being afraid. They all laughed as they realized that although they had gone off in different directions, from working at home to managing companies, they were experiencing similar feelings. Everyone was trying to cope with the unexpected changes that were happening to them in recent years. And most admitted that they did not know a good way to handle them. Then Michael said, I used to be afraid of change. When a big change came along in our business, we didn't know what to do. So we didn't adjust and we almost lost it. That is, he continued, until I heard a funny little story that changed everything. How so? Nathan asked. Well, the story changed the way I look at change, from losing something to gaining something, and it showed me how to do it. After that, things quickly improved at work and in my life. At first, I was annoyed with the obvious simplicity of the story because it sounded like something we might have been told in school. Then I realized I was really annoyed with myself for not seeing the obvious and doing what works when things change. Now, when I realized the four characters in the story represented the various parts of myself, I decided who I wanted to act like and I changed. Later, I passed the story on to some people in our company and they passed it on to others, and soon our business did much better because most of us adapted to change better. And like me, many people said it helped them in their personal lives. However, there were a few people who said they got nothing out of it. And I want you to pay attention because some of you may likely get nothing out of this, while some of you will see that this will actually help you to adapt to change. So he says some people got nothing out of it. Now, however, they either knew the lessons and were already living them, or more commonly, they thought they already knew everything and didn't want to learn. And see, this is something that's such a pet peeve of mine. There are absolutely some people who think they know everything, which you could never. There's always someone who'll know more than you. There's always something else you could learn. There's always room for improvements. As I said on yesterday's video, for those of you who watched it, about love being the highest of vibrations, at the end of the day, people who think they know everything are so annoying to those of us who actually do. I'm joking, of course, but they're so annoying because you can't teach them anything. Because the person who thinks they know it all always has a rebuttal for anything you try to teach or tell them. Okay. And they don't really listen to absorb the information you try to give them because they're just not receptive, because they've already made it up in their mind that they know what's best in all situations. They couldn't see why so many others were benefiting from it. Now, when one of our senior executives who was having difficulty adapting said the story was a waste of time, other people kidded him, saying they knew which character he was in the story, meaning the one who learned nothing new and did not change. What's the story? Angela asked. Well, it's called Who Moved My Cheese? The group laughed. I think I like it already, Carlos said. Would you tell us the story? Maybe we can get something from it. Sure, Michael replied. I'd be happy to. It doesn't take long. And so he began. Who Moved My Cheese? The story. Once long ago in a land far away, there lived four little characters who ran through a maze looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. Two were mice named Sniff and Scurry, and two were little people or beings who were as small as the mice, but who looked and acted a lot like people today. Their names were Hem and Haw. Due to their small size, it would be easy not to notice what the four of them were doing. But if you looked closely enough, you could discover the most amazing things. Every day, the mice and the little people spent time in the maze looking for their own special cheese. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, possessing simple brains and good instincts, search for the hard nibbling cheese that they liked, as often mice do. The little people, Hem and Haw, used their complex brains filled with many beliefs and emotions to search for a very different kind of cheese with a capital C, which they believed would make them feel happy and successful. As different as the mice and little people were, they shared something in common. Every morning, they each put on their jogging suits and running shoes, left their homes, and raced out into the maze looking for their favorite cheese. The maze was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, some containing delicious cheese, but there were also dark corners and blind alleys leading nowhere. It was an easy place for anyone to get lost. However, for those who found their way, the maze held secrets that let them enjoy a better life. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, used the simple trial and error method of finding cheese. They ran down one corridor, and if it proved empty, they simply turned and ran down another. They remembered the corridors that held no cheese and quickly went into new areas. Sniff would smell out the general direction of the cheese using his great nose, and Scurry would race ahead. They got lost, as you might expect, went off into the wrong direction, and often bumped into walls. But after a while, they found their way. Like the mice, the two little people, him and Haw, also used their ability to think and learn from their past experiences. However, they relied on their complex brains to develop more sophisticated methods of finding the cheese. Sometimes they did well, but at other times, their powerful human beliefs and emotions took over and clouded the way that they looked at things. It made life in the maze more complicated and challenging. Nonetheless, Sniff and Scurry, him and Haw, all discovered in their own way what they were looking for. They each found their own kind of cheese one day at the end of one of the corridors in Cheese Station C. Every morning after that, the mice and the little people dressed in their running gear and headed over to Cheese Station C. It wasn't long before they established their own routine. Sniff and Scurry continued to wake early every day and race through the maze, always finding the same routes. When they arrived at their destination, the mice took off their running shoes, tied them together, and hung them around their necks so they could get to them quickly whenever they needed to put them on again. Now, then they enjoyed the cheese. In the beginning, him and Haw also raced toward Cheese Station C every morning to enjoy the tasty new morsels that awaited them. But after a while, a different routine set in for the little people. Him and Haw awoke each day a little later, dressed a little slower, and walked to Cheese Station C. They walked, pay attention. They didn't run like they usually would do. They started walking and moving a whole lot slower. After all, they knew where the cheese was now and how to get there. You see, so they felt like, oh, we don't have to race and be in a rush because the cheese is there. It's been there yesterday. It's there today. We're just going to walk and take our time. No need to hurry. The cheese isn't going anywhere. So that's the mindset they took on. Now, they had no idea where the cheese came from or who even put it there. They just assumed it would be there. As soon as him and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C each morning, they settled in and made themselves at home. They hung up their jogging suits, put away their running shoes, and put on their slippers. They were becoming very comfortable now that they had found the cheese. This is great, him said. There is enough cheese here to last us forever. The little people felt happy and successful and thought they were now secure. It wasn't long before him and Haw regarded the cheese they found at Cheese Station C as their cheese. It was such a large store of cheese that they eventually moved their homes to be closer to it and built a social life all around it. To make themselves feel more at home, him and Haw decorated the walls with sayings and even drew pictures of cheese around them, which made them smile. One of the things they posted read, "Having cheese makes you happy." Sometimes him and Haw would take their friends to see their pile of cheese at Cheese Station C and then point to it with pride saying, "Pretty nice cheese, huh?" Sometimes they shared it with their friends and sometimes they didn't. "We deserve this cheese," him said. "We certainly had to work long and hard enough to find it." He picked up a nice fresh piece and ate it. Afterward, him fell asleep as he often did. And then every night, the little people would waddle home full of cheese, and every morning they would confidently return for more. This went on for quite some time. After a while, Him's and Haw's confidence grew into the arrogance of success. Soon they became so comfortable, they didn't even notice what was happening. As time went on, Sniff and Scurry continued their routine. They arrived early each morning and sniffed and scratched and scurried about Cheese Station C, inspecting the area to see if there had been any changes from the day before. Then they would sit down to nibble on the cheese. One morning, they arrived at Cheese Station C and discovered there was no cheese. They weren't surprised. Sniff and Scurry had noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller every day. They were prepared for the inevitable and knew instinctively what to do. They looked at each other, removed the running shoes they had tied together and hung conveniently around their necks, put them on their feet, and laced them up. The mice did not overanalyze things. To the mice, the problem and the answer were both simple. The situation at Cheese Station C had changed. So Sniff and Scurry decided to change. They both looked out into the maze. Then Sniff lifted his nose, sniffled, and nodded to Scurry, who took off running through the maze, while Sniff followed as fast as he could. They were quickly off in search of new cheese. Later that same day, him and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C. They had not been paying attention at all to the small changes that had been taking place each day, so they took it for granted their cheese would be there. They were unprepared for what they found. What? No cheese? Him yelled. He continued yelling, no cheese? No cheese? As though if he shouted loud enough, someone would put it back. I absolutely cannot with him and Haw. Who moved my cheese? He hollered. Finally, he put his hands on his hips. His face turned red, and he screamed at the top of his voice, it's not fair. Haw just shook his head in disbelief. He, too, had counted on finding cheese at Cheese Station C. He stood there for a long time, frozen with shock. He was just not ready for this. Him was yelling something, but Haw didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to deal with what was facing him, so he just tuned everything out. The little people's behavior was not very attractive or productive, but it was understandable. Finding cheese wasn't easy, and it meant a great deal more to little people than just having enough to eat, just enough of it to eat every day. Finding cheese was the little people's way of getting what they thought they needed to be happy. They had their own ideas of what cheese meant to them, depending on their taste. For some, finding cheese was having material things. For others, it was enjoying good health or developing a spiritual sense of well-being. For Haw, cheese just meant feeling safe, having a loving family someday, and living in a cozy cottage on Cheddar Lane. To him, cheese was becoming a big cheese in charge of others and owning a big house atop Camberbatch Hill. Because cheese was very important to them, the two little people spent a long time trying to decide what to do. All they could think of was to keep looking around Cheeseless Station C to see if the cheese was really gone. Now, have you all ever done that? Have you all ever been looking for something you know it's not there, but you just keep looking and hoping it's going to be there? Let me give you an example. So last week, I couldn't find anything to eat. So I'm looking all through the cabinets, looking in the refrigerator. I must have looked in that refrigerator, pulling out the drawers at the bottom about 10 times because I didn't feel like going to the store. So I just kept saying, it's got to be something in here I can eat. It's got to be something, a can of black beans. I can make me some black bean tacos or whatever. And I'm just looking in that refrigerator. And so finally, Reno, my son, comes into the kitchen and he starts laughing. He said, why do black people always do that? And I said, what? No, something's not there, but they think the longer they look, it's just going to appear. So clearly that's what him and Haw were doing. Pay attention. Okay. So anyway, goes on to say that all they could think of was to keep looking around Cheese Station C to see if the cheese was really gone. While Sniff and Scurry had quickly just moved on. Him and Haw continued to hem and haw. They ranted and raved at the injustice of it all. Haw started to get depressed. What would happen if the cheese wasn't there tomorrow? He had made plans, future plans based on this cheese. The little people couldn't believe it. How could this have happened? No one had warned them. It wasn't right. It was not the way things were supposed to be. Him and Haw went home that night hungry and discouraged. But before they left, Haw wrote on the wall, the more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. That was a little sad note he wrote on the wall. Clearly forlorn. The next day, him and Haw left their homes and returned to Cheese Station C again, where they still expected somehow to find their cheese. The situation hadn't changed. The cheese was no longer there. The little people didn't know what to do. Him and Haw just stood there immobilized like two statues. Haw shut his eyes as tight as he could and put his hands over his ears. He just wanted to block everything out. He didn't want to know the cheese supply had gradually been getting smaller. He believed it had all been moved all of a sudden. Him analyzed the situation over and over, and eventually his complicated brain with its huge belief system took hold. Why did they do this to me? He demanded. What's really going on here? Finally, Haw opened his eyes, looked around, and said, by the way, where are Sniff and Scurry? Do they think they know something that we don't? Or do you think they know something that we don't? Him scoffed. What would they know? Him continued. They're just mice. They just respond to what happens. We're little people. We're smarter than mice. We should be able to figure this out. I know we're smarter, Haw said, but we don't seem to be acting smarter at the moment. Things are changing around here, Him. Maybe we need to change and do things differently. Why should we change? Him asked. We're little people. We're special. This sort of thing should not happen to us. Or if it does, we should at least get some benefits. Sounds like privilege to me. Pay attention. Why should we get benefits? Haw asked. Because we're entitled, Him claimed. Entitled to what? Haw wanted to know. We're entitled to our cheese. Why? Haw asked. Because we didn't cause this problem. Somebody else did this, and we should get something out of it. Haw suggested maybe we should simply stop analyzing the situation so much and go find some new cheese. Oh no, Him argued. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. While him and Haw were still trying to decide what to do, Sniff and Scurry were already well on their way. They went further into the maze, up and down corridors, looking for cheese in every cheese station they could find. They didn't think of anything else but finding new cheese. They didn't find any for some time until they finally went into an area of the maze where they had never been before, Cheese Station Inn. They squealed with delight. They found what they had been looking for, a great supply of new cheese. They could barely believe their eyes. It was the biggest store of cheese the mice had ever seen. In the meantime, him and Haw were still back in Cheese Station C evaluating their situation. They were now suffering from the effects of having no cheese. They were becoming frustrated and angry and were blaming each other for the situation they were in. Now and then, Haw thought about his mice friends, Sniff and Scurry, and wondered if they had found any cheese yet. He believed they might be having a hard time, as running through the maze usually involved some uncertainty. But he also knew that it was likely to last or only last for a while. Sometimes Haw would imagine Sniff and Scurry finding new cheese and enjoying it. He thought about how good it would be for him to be out on an adventure in the maze and to find fresh new cheese. He could almost taste it. The more clearly Haw saw the image of himself finding and enjoying the new cheese, the more he saw himself leaving Cheese Station C. Let's go, he exclaimed all of a sudden. No, Haw quickly responded. I like it here. It's comfortable. It's what I know. Besides, it's dangerous out there. No, it isn't, Haw argued. We've run through many parts of the maze before, and we can do it again. I'm getting too old for that, Him said. And I'm afraid I'm not interested in getting lost and making a fool of myself. Are you? With that, Haw's fear of failing returned, and his hope of finding new cheese faded. So every day, the little people continued to do what they had done before. They went to Cheese Station C, found no cheese, and then returned home, carrying their worries and frustrations with them. They tried to deny what was happening, but found it harder to get sleep, had less energy the next day, and were becoming irritable. Their homes were not the nurturing places they once were. The little people had difficulty sleeping and even had nightmares about not finding any cheese. My fan page says they got the shakes. Okay, they sound like it. But him and Hall still returned to Cheese Station C and waited there every day. Him said, you know, if we just work together, we'll find that nothing has really changed that much. The cheese is probably nearby. Maybe they just hid it behind the wall. The next day, him and Ha returned with tools. Him had the chisel, while Ha banged the hammer until they made a hole in the wall of Cheese Station C. They peered inside but found no cheese. They were disappointed but believed they could solve the problem. So they started earlier, stayed longer, and worked harder. But after a while, all they had was a large hole in the wall. Ha was beginning to realize the difference between activity and productivity. Maybe, him said, we should just sit here and see what happens. Sooner or later, they have to put the cheese back. Now, I want you to pay attention because Ha is clearly thinking, or him is clearly thinking that someone has just moved the cheese, just taken it somewhere and they can't find it, thinking that hopefully they'll just bring it back. Ha wanted to believe that, so each day he went home to rest and returned reluctantly with him to Cheese Station C. But the cheese never reappeared. By now, the little people were growing weak from hunger and stress. Ha was getting tired of just waiting for their situation to improve. He began to see that the longer they stayed in their cheeseless situation, the worse off they would be. Ha knew they were losing their edge. Finally, one day, Ha began laughing to himself. Ha ha, look at us. We keep doing the same things over and over again and wonder why things don't get better. If this wasn't so ridiculous, it would be even funnier. Ha did not like the idea of having to run through the maze again because he knew he would get lost and have no idea where he would find any cheese. But he had to laugh at his folly when he saw what his fear was doing to him. He asked him, where did we put our running shoes? It took a long time to find them because they had put everything away when they found their Cheese Station C, thinking they wouldn't be needing them anymore. As him saw his friend getting into his running gear, he said, you're not really going out into that maze again, are you? Why don't you just wait with me right here until they put the cheese back? I mean, he's determined that somebody took this cheese and that all they need to do is just sit there until the people put it back. Let me tell you all something. This is exactly what happens to people in life. There will be the person who doesn't want to change. They resist change. They fear change because it's the unknown. It's not what they may expect. You know, they fear may not be what they expect, or they're fearful of it. And so people often become complacent. And when you become complacent, you get into the habit of doing the same old thing all the time, day in and day out. And you just get so used to that, you become comfortable in that. In fact, too comfortable. And then when things start to change, you just don't want to. You just continue to do the same old, same old. And it's also like a person who's in a toxic relationship. They know that they should get out of the relationship, but to them, this relationship, the partner they're dealing with, whether toxic or not, is their cheese. They feel like they need this person. They may have developed a codependency to this person. Though they know the relationship is toxic, they don't want to leave because they are fearful of change, fearful that they won't find someone else who will accept them, fearful that the other person may find someone else that they're happy with and they won't be happy. Just a lot of things. This is really a good way to let people, evaluate yourselves. Think about things that you do. Do you get stuck in negative thinking patterns? Because this is clearly what him and Ha are doing. They're being pessimistic. Whereas you see, Sniff and Scurry were optimistic. They didn't get upset. They didn't get annoyed. When they saw the cheese was gone, they knew what they had to do. They'd already been making a plan because they saw that the pile of cheese was growing smaller and smaller. And so they knew that eventually that cheese is going to be all gone. We're going to have to go find some more cheese. So we got to already be prepared for that. But meanwhile, him and Hall, they got complacent. They started to feel a sense of entitlement. The cheese is there today. It's there every day we go. It's going to always be here. So I don't have to go and do anything different. See, that's the mindset that some people get about other people. You could be mistreating someone, arguing with them, being verbally abusive, mentally abusive, playing psychological mind games, cheating on them, lying to them, and all of that. And because that person stays with you and tries to work it out continuously, some people develop the mindset of entitlement that they're not going anywhere. They're going to stay right here and just put up with my mess. That's what they're going to do. They've always done it and they'll always do it. And so then when that person finally decides to leave, now they're devastated. Now they can't stand it. Now they can't take it. Now they want to act the whole fool and make threats and all of that. You see, this is what happens. It reminds me of a video that I saw yesterday of a guy and a female. They were at a gas station and the woman had paid for the gas. And so she was asking her boyfriend to get out of the car and pump the gas. And he refused to. He said, just hurry up so we can go. We got somewhere to be. She's like, no, get out and pump this gas. I paid for it. You can pump it. He refused. Now she's recording him. He is getting very upset because she's recording him. So he starts, going back and forth with her. She goes around to his side of the car, opens the door and tells him to get out and pump the gas. Like she's trying to make him do it. What you have to realize is you can't make anyone do anything they don't want to do. And you shouldn't want someone to do something they don't want to do. If they don't want to do it for you, then let them be. Move on your way. But she sat there demanding. And you know what he told her? She said, you're going to get out of my house. She was like, I'm going to put all your stuff out. He said, you ain't going nowhere. You ain't going nowhere. Just get in the car. Let's hurry up. And he was like, okay, I'm sorry. Now can we go? But it was, of course, not sincere. He was just saying that to get what he wanted. Kathy B said she saw that video. Yes. So, the whole thing is you can't make a person do something they don't want to do, and nor should you want to. People should be willing, if they care about you, to do things freely just because you ask. I mean, if it's things within reason, of course. And so they say, because you just don't get it, Hall said. I didn't want to see it either, but now I realize they're never going to put yesterday's cheese back. It's time to find new cheese. Him argued, but what if there is no cheese out there? See, he's being pessimistic. What if there is no cheese out there? Or even if there is, what if you don't find it? I don't know, Hall said. He had asked himself those same questions so too many times and felt the fears again that kept him where he was. He asked himself, where am I more likely to find cheese, here or in the maze? He painted a picture in his mind. He saw himself venturing out into the maze with a smile on his face. While this picture surprised him, it made him feel good. He saw himself getting lost now and then in the maze, but felt confident he would eventually find new cheese out there and all good things would come from it. He gathered his courage. Then he used his imagination to paint the most believable picture that he could, with the most realistic details of him finding and enjoying the new cheese or the taste of new cheese. He saw himself eating Swiss cheese with holes in it, bright orange cheddar and American cheeses, Italian mozzarella, and wonderfully soft French camembert cheese. And then he heard him say something and realized they were still at Cheese Station C. Hall said, sometimes things change and they are never the same again. This looks like one of those times. That's life. Life moves on, and so should we. Now, he's got a little bit of sense because he actually wants to do something different. Remember, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. Now, they've clearly been coming to Cheese Station C for days now, and there's no cheese. So why would you continue to come? Hall looked at his emaciated companion and tried to talk sense to him. But him's fear had turned into anger and he just wouldn't listen. Haw didn't mean to be rude to his friend, but he had to laugh at how silly they both looked. As Haw prepared to leave, he started to feel more alive, knowing that he was finally able to laugh at himself, let go, and to move on. Haw laughed and announced, "It's maze time." Him didn't laugh and didn't even respond. He picked up a small, sharp rock and wrote a serious thought on the wall for him to think about. As was his custom, Haw even drew a picture of the cheese around it, hoping it would help him to smile, lighten up, and go after the new cheese. But him didn't want to see it. And this is what it said. What would you do if you weren't afraid? He thought about it. He knew sometimes some fear can be good. When you are afraid things are going to get worse, if you don't do something, it can prompt you into action. But it is not good when you're so afraid that it keeps you from doing anything. This is absolutely true. He looked at his right, looked to his right, to the part of the maze where he had never been and felt the fear. Then he took a deep breath, turned right into the maze, and jogged slowly into the unknown. As he tried to find his way, Hall worried at first that he might have waited too long in Cheese Station C. He hadn't had any cheese for so long that he was now weak. It took him longer and was more painful than usual to get through the maze. He decided that if he ever got the chance again, he would get out of his comfort zone and adapt to change sooner. It would make things easier. Then Haw smiled a weak smile as he thought, better late than never. This is absolutely true. This is absolutely true. Mr. Hotel said I skipped a page. No, I didn't. No, I didn't, beloved. I don't think. Hold on. Oh, yes, I did. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Hotel. He must be reading right along, honey. Okay, so yeah, let me start right here. Okay, so he wrote a message and drew the cheese around it. It said, if you do not change, you can become extinct. Not extinct. Anyway, then Hoss stuck his head out and peered anxiously into the maze. He thought about how he'd gotten himself into this cheeseless station. Okay, I think I did read this part. Okay, then he says, what would you do if you weren't afraid? He thought about it. He knew sometimes fear can be good. When you're afraid things are going to get worse, if you don't do something, it can actually prompt you into action. So he then took a deep breath, turned right into the maze, and started jogging slowly into the unknown. Now, as he tried to find his way, Hall worried at first, that he might have waited too long in Cheese Station C. He hadn't had any cheese for so long that he was now weak. It took him longer and it was more painful than usual to get through the maze. He decided that if he ever got the chance again, he would get out of his comfort zone and adapt to change sooner. It would make things easier. Then Hall smiled a weak smile as he thought, better late than never. And this is absolutely true. Sometimes we think that it's too late, but as long as you have breath in your body, like the motivational video that I posted for you, you still have a chance. You have a choice and you have a chance to make a difference and to do things differently. Now, during the next several days, Hall found a little cheese here and a little cheese there, but nothing that lasted very long. He had hoped to find enough cheese to take some back to him and encourage him to come out into the maze. But Hall didn't feel confident enough yet. He had to admit he found it confusing in the maze. Things seemed to have changed since the last time he was out there. Just when he thought he was getting ahead, he would get lost in the corridors. It seemed his progress was 2 steps forward and 1 step backward. It was a challenge, but he had to admit that being back in the maze hunting for cheese wasn't nearly as bad as he feared it might be. As time went on, he began to wonder if it was realistic for him to expect to find new cheese. He wondered if he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Then he laughed, realizing that he had nothing to chew on at the moment. Whenever he started to get discouraged, he reminded himself that what he was doing that what he was doing, as uncomfortable as it was at the moment, was in reality much better than staying in the cheeseless station. He was taking control rather than simply letting things happen to him. Then he reminded himself if Sniff and Scurry could move on, so could he. Later, as Hall looked back on things, he realized that the cheese at Cheese Station C had not just disappeared overnight, as he had once believed. The amount of cheese that had been there toward the end had been getting smaller, and what was left had grown old. It didn't even taste as good. Mold may even have begun to grow on the old cheese, although he hadn't noticed it. He had to admit, however, that if he had wanted to, he probably could have seen what was coming, but he didn't. Hall now realized that the change probably would not have taken him by surprise if he had been watching what was happening all along and if he had anticipated change. Maybe that's what Sniff and Scurry had been doing. He decided he would stay more alert from now on. He would expect change to happen and look for it. He would trust his basic instincts to sense when change was going to occur and be ready to adapt to it. He stopped for a rest and wrote on the wall of the maze. He wrote, "Smell the cheese often so you know when it is getting old." Sometime later, after finding cheese for what seemed like a long time, Hall finally came across a huge cheese station which looked promising. When he went inside, however, he was most disappointed to discover that the cheese station was empty. This empty feeling has happened to me too often, he thought. He felt like giving up. Hall was losing his physical strength. He knew he was lost and was afraid he would not survive. He thought about turning around and heading back to Cheese Station C. At least if he made it back and him was still there, Hall wouldn't be alone. Then he asked himself the same question again. What would I do if I weren't afraid? Hall thought he was past his fear, but he was afraid more often than he liked to admit, even to himself. He wasn't always sure what he was afraid of, but in his weakened condition, he knew now that he was simply fearful of going on alone. Hall didn't know it, but he was running behind because he was still weighed down by fearful beliefs. Hall wondered if him had moved on or if he was still paralyzed by his own fears. Then Hall remembered the times when he had felt his best in the maze. It was when he was moving along. He wrote on the wall, knowing it was as much a reminder to himself as it was a marking for his friend, him, hopefully to follow. And this is what he wrote. Movement in a new direction helps you find new cheese. Hall looked down the dark passageway and was aware of his fear. What lay ahead? Was it empty? Or worse, were there dangers lurking? He began to imagine all kinds of frightening things that could happen to him. He was scaring himself to death. He laughed at himself. He realized his fears were making things worse. So he did what he would do if he weren't afraid. He moved in a new direction. As he started running down the dark corridor, he began to smile. Hall didn't realize it yet, but he was discovering what nourished his soul. He was letting go and trusting what lay ahead for him, even though he did not know exactly what that was. To his surprise, Hall started to enjoy himself more and more. Why do I feel so good? He wondered. I don't have any cheese and I don't know where I'm going. Before long, he knew why he felt good. He stopped to write again on the wall. And this is what he wrote. When you stop being afraid, you feel good. Hall realized he had been held captive by his own fear. Moving in a new direction had freed him. Now he felt the cool breeze that was blowing in this part of the maze, and it was refreshing. He took in some deep breaths and felt invigorated by the movement. Once he had gotten past his fear, it turned out to be more enjoyable than he once believed it could be. He hadn't felt this way for a long time. He had almost forgotten how much fun it was to go for it. To make things even better, Hall started to paint a picture in his mind again. He saw himself in great realistic detail sitting in the middle of a pile of all his favorite cheeses, from cheddar to brie. He saw himself eating the many cheeses he liked and enjoyed what he saw. Then he imagined how much he would enjoy all their great taste. The more clearly he saw the image of himself enjoying new cheese, the more real and believable it became. He could sense that he was going to find it. He wrote, imagining yourself enjoying your new cheese leads you to it. You see what he was doing here? Who knows what he was doing here? Somebody put it in the chat. Somebody put it in the chat. What was Hall doing when he was thinking this? When he was imagining himself sitting amongst the cheese and eating it and enjoying it and all of that, what was he doing? Can anyone put that in the chat? Mr. Hotel said optimistic. Yeah, he was very much so being optimistic. But what was he specifically doing, beloveds, when he's sitting there thinking about this cheese and all of that? He was manifesting. He was manifesting. That's what he was doing. He wasn't visualizing. Claudette said manifesting. Yes, he was manifesting. You see, he was visualizing himself sitting there with the cheeses, all the cheeses that he wanted and liked, and he was eating them. So that's what he was doing. He was manifesting it. Now, he kept thinking about what he could gain instead of what he was losing. He was thinking positively. He had taken himself out of the negative mindset, and he was being optimistic, like Mr. Hotel said. Okay? He was looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. He changed his way of thinking. He thought about his thinking also, which is metacognition, which I taught you all about months ago. Now, he wondered why he had always thought that a change would lead to something worse. Now he realized that change could lead to something better. Why didn't I see this before? He asked himself. Then he raced through the maze with greater strength and agility. Before long, he spotted a cheese station and became excited as he noticed little pieces of new cheese near the entrance. There were types of cheese he had never seen before, but they looked great. He tried them and found they were delicious. He ate most of the new cheese bits that were available and put a few in his pocket to have later and perhaps share with him. He began to regain his strength. He entered the cheese station with a great excitement, but to his dismay, he found it was empty. Someone had already been there and had left only the few bits of new cheese. He realized that if he had moved sooner, he would very likely have found a good deal of new cheese there. Hall decided to go back and see if him was ready to join him. As he retraced his steps, he stopped and wrote on the wall. And this is what he wrote. The quicker you let go of old cheese, the sooner you find new cheese. After a while, Hall made his way back to Cheese Station C and found him. He offered him bits of new cheese, but was turned down. Him appreciated his friend's gesture, but said, I don't think I would like new cheese. It's not what I'm used to. I want my own cheese back, and I'm not going to change until I get what I want. This is a stubborn person. This is someone who refuses to accept the inevitable, that everything must change, nothing stays the same. That's what pretty much he was doing. So he just wanted what he wanted. Now, Hall just shook his head in disappointment and reluctantly went back out on his own. As he returned to the farthest point that he had reached in the maze, he missed his friend, but realized he liked what he was discovering. Even though he found what he hoped for, even before he found what he'd hoped for, what he'd hoped would be a great supply of new cheese, if ever he knew that what made him happy wasn't just having cheese. He was happy when he wasn't being run by his fear. He liked what he was doing now. Knowing this, Hall didn't feel as weak as he did when he stayed in Cheese Station C with no cheese. Just realizing he was not letting his fear stop him and knowing that he had taken a new direction nourished him and gave him strength. Now he felt that it was just a question of time before he found what he needed. In fact, he sensed he had already found what he was looking for. He smiled as he realized it is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. That's what he wrote on the wall. Hall realized again, as he had once before, that what you are afraid of is never as bad as what you imagine. The fear you let build up in your mind is worse than the situation that actually exists. He'd been so afraid of never finding new cheese that he didn't even want to start looking. But since starting his journey, he had found enough cheese in the corridors to keep him going. Now he looked forward to finding more. Just looking ahead was becoming exciting. His old thinking had been clouded by his worries and fears. He used to think about not having enough cheese or not having it last as long as he wanted. He used to think more about what could go wrong than what could go right. But that had changed in the days since he had left Cheese Station C. He used to believe that cheese should never be moved and that change wasn't right. Now he realized it was natural for change to continually occur, whether you expect it or not. Change could surprise you if only you didn't expect it and weren't looking for it. When he realized he had changed his beliefs, he paused to write on the wall. And this is what he wrote: Old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. Hall hadn't found any cheese yet, but as he ran through the maze, he thought about what he had already learned. Hall now realized that his new beliefs were encouraging new behaviors. He was behaving differently than when he kept returning to the same cheeseless station. He knew that when you change what you believe, you change what you do. You see, in order to change, you have to first change your thinking. You can believe that a change will harm you and resist it, or you can believe that finding new cheese will help you and embrace the change. It all depends on what you choose to believe. And he wrote on the wall again. He wrote, When you see that you can find and enjoy new cheese, you change course. Hall knew he would be in better shape now if he had dealt with the change sooner and left Cheese Station C earlier. He would feel stronger in body and spirit, and he could have coped better with the challenge of finding new cheese. In fact, he probably could have found it by now if he had expected change rather than wasting time denying that the change had already taken place. He used his imagination again and saw himself finding and savoring new cheese. He decided to proceed into the more unknown parts of the maze and found little bits of cheese here and there. Hall began to regain his strength and confidence. As he thought back on where he had come from, Hall was glad he had written on the wall in many places. He trusted that it would serve as a marked trail for him to follow through the maze if he ever chose to leave Cheese Station C. Hall just hoped he was heading in the right direction. He thought about the possibility that him would read the handwriting on the wall and find his way. He wrote on the wall what he had been thinking about for some time. He wrote, Noticing small changes early helps you adapt to the bigger changes that are to come. By now, Hall had let go of the past and was adapting to the present. He continued on through the maze with greater strength and speed, and before long it happened. When it seemed like he had made or had been in the maze forever, his journey, or at least this part of his journey, ended quickly and happily. Hall proceeded along a corridor that was new to him, rounded a corner, and found new cheese at Cheese Station Inn. When he went inside, he was startled by what he saw. Piled high everywhere was the greatest supply of cheese he had ever seen. He didn't recognize all that he saw, as some kinds of cheese were new to him. Then he wondered for a moment whether it was real or just his imagination, until he saw his old friends Sniff and Scurry. Sniff welcomed Hall with a nod of his head, and Scurry waved his paw. Their fat little bellies showed that they had been here for some time. Hall quickly said his hellos and soon took bites of every one of his favorite cheeses. He pulled off his shoes, tied the laces together, and hung them around his neck in case he needed them again. Sniff and Scurry laughed. They nodded their heads in admiration. Then Hall jumped into the new cheese. Then, when he had eaten his fill, he lifted a piece of fresh cheese and made a toast. Hooray for change! As Hall enjoyed the new cheese, he reflected on what he had learned. He realized that when he had been afraid to change, he had been holding on to the illusion of old cheese that was no longer there. So, what was it that made him change? Was it the fear of starving to death? Hall smiled as he thought it certainly helped. Then he laughed and realized that he had started to change as soon as he had learned to laugh at himself and at what he had been going through or what he had been doing wrong. He realized the fastest way to change is to laugh at your own folly. Then you can let go and quickly move on. He knew that he had learned something useful about moving on from his mice friends, Sniff and Scurry. They kept life simple. They didn't overanalyze or overcomplicate things. When the situation changed and the cheese had been moved, they changed and moved with the cheese. He had remembered that, or he would remember that. Hall had also used his wonderful brain to do what little people do better than mice. He envisioned himself in realistic detail, finding something better, much better. He reflected on the mistakes he had made in the past and used them to plan for his future. He knew that you could learn to deal with change. You could be more aware of the need to keep things simple, be flexible, and move quickly. You did not need to overcomplicate matters or confuse yourself with fearful beliefs. You could fear or you could notice when the little changes began so you would be better prepared for the big change that might be coming. He knew he needed to adapt faster, for if you do not adapt in time, you might as well not adapt at all. Okay, so with that all being said, I'm going to stop right there. We're almost done. I read a whole lot more than I anticipated. We're on page 72 when we pick back up. And remember, the book is only about, I think it's like 90 pages. Yeah, it's 94 pages. Okay. So we have like 22 more pages, and I'll finish that up on tomorrow's broadcast. So, so far, what we are seeing in him and Hall and Sniff and Scurry is that Sniff and Scurry, they're positive thinkers. They have a positive mindset. They don't worry. They don't procrastinate. They're not pessimistic. They're optimistic. They're motivated, encouraged, and inspired. They have all these high vibrational emotions. Okay. They're high vibrational, and high vibrational people are very positive and they get things done. People that are low vibrational, pessimistic, they don't feel encouraged. They're rather discouraged. They feel down in the dumps. They don't want to change. They fight against change. They don't flow with the ebb of the tide. You see, in life, you have to remember the nursery rhyme, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Remember, I told you that we are bodies of water like the ocean, right? We can either go with the flow or we can crash and burn. Okay? Sometimes water can flow or it can crash. And sometimes we crash and burn because we don't learn to go with the flow. You have to change as often things do. Okay, everything must change, nothing stays the same. You have to be very, you know, very much so positive. You can't become complacent. You see, when you become complacent, you get stuck and become stagnant in the same set of circumstances because now you're used to this and you start to think sometimes. Many people think this is as good as it gets. I'm too old to change. Remember, one of them said that, him and her, I'm too old to change. I need to just stay here. That's how people feel, but you're never too old. There's a story about a 94-year-old man who went back to college and got his bachelor's degree. You're never too old until you're in the grave. Okay, as long as you have breath in your body, you always have time to do something different and change your circumstances. And remember, you create your own reality. But you see, here's the thing. You have to pay attention to people who discourage you. Like Hall decided that I'm going to go out into this maze. I'm going to go out and look for some more cheese. I can't stay here. If I stay here, nothing's going to change. It's just going to get worse and worse. When he finally realized that and he went out and about to find more cheese, him was still sitting there in denial, didn't want to do anything different. And remember, it's him who kept him there so long in the first place, because early on, Hall realized that he needed to leave, that he needed to go out and look for more cheese. But it was Hall, or it was him, who discouraged him. It was him who discouraged him, said, no, let's just sit here and wait. Stay here and wait with me. You see, you have people like that in life, people who will hold you back, people who will keep you down because they don't want to do anything with their lives. They're complacent. They want you to be complacent. They don't want you to move past any further than where they already are. Misery loves company. Him was miserable, and he wanted Hall to be miserable too. Didn't even want Hall to at least go out and try to find something better. Just stay here with me and let's just be miserable together. At least we've got each other, even though we're about to starve to death, clearly. Okay, so anyway, that all being said, I'm going to conclude this broadcast. Now, there's another live coming up in 30 minutes. That's going to be a premiere. You don't want to miss this. It is, it is about the salts of salvation and the astrological connection. Okay, Zodiac and salts of salvation. So you need to tune into that. Okay, I promise you're going to enjoy it. I sent you all the links already. It's going to be premiering in like 35 minutes at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So with that all being said, everyone, please like the video. I hope you all got something out of this, and we're going to finish up tomorrow, and then we'll do some more discussion. If anybody wants me to drop the link, if you have questions, you want to have a Q&A, we can do that too on tomorrow. With that all being said, I wish you all love, peace, and prosperity. Each one teach one. That's how we grow and thrive. Do something productive, constructive, but never destructive. And always remember, beloveds, to keep the Most High first in your lives. Peace.